Buonasera.
Good evening. Welcome back to this venue. And this all, and not only here, we have witnessed to great events in these days. These are the unexpected things which do happen. The meeting with President Napolitano and the meeting with friends from Egypt indeed have been very important moments of great historical importance. I'm sure that many of you attended these two meetings, so that's why I say welcome back to this hall where great things happened. Today we have Professor Costantino Esposito with us. I would like to thank him for accepting this very demanding task. He has been asked to expand on the title of the 32nd meeting in Rimini. He is ordinary professor of the history of philosophy at the University of Bari. He devoted his research to the phenomenological ontology of Heidegger, to the physical and political life of Immanuel Kant, and to the origin of modern philosophy in the thinkings of Francisco Suarez. He published many books. Just mentioned the last one, Una ragione inquieta, which has just been published, which starts with an interview published in Tracce, which was the kickoff of the thinking and the analysis of Professor Esposito on the issue of certainty. It was an interview on the age of uncertainty. I would like to introduce him by sharing with you some shots of experience which refer to the history of what has been done in these past few months on the title of the meeting. Increasingly, in the past days and years, we have seen that the titles of the meeting of Rimini are not just the hint to a theme to be discussed. As a matter of fact, they are the basis of experience, and they are an important step in experience. It's a human experience, and what we do before the meeting, not only in chronological terms, but also in other terms, and which is there to illustrate the meeting nature. And the titles are just the result of an intuition of someone who then involved all the others to get their support. So this intuition is a part of the human experience which comes before the meeting. It is the meeting itself which is part of the experience. The meeting would not be what it is and what we see, what we had seen in the past and in these days, i.e. an extraordinary opportunity to meet others. And this is such because it has its own history. I mean, it's something that we like, something that can love this history, something which can desire to be changed by what happens here. If this were not there, all the people coming at the meeting to meet something special, as they say, they meet something which comes completely unexpected to them. And this experience would not be there if this subject is not there, if this previous existence did not happen. So this is something which lives throughout the year. Those who prepare the meeting, but not only that. And by freely, because this is the history of freedom, being guided freely by the mystery of the company of Don Giussani, which is happening again as a always regenerating event in the person of Don Carron. If that history were not there, and we are part of that history, and we do that freely and voluntarily, if that was not there, we would not be here in Rimini. This is so because we have something which makes us very close to a company from which the truth of life depends. Over the years, over the time, we have been guided by this history, and we have accepted, we have picked up the challenge to propose a theme every year. The theme of this year is the issue of certainty. We have been accompanied by this, and that is what guided us in selecting the exhibitions and the events. It has been a part of our daily life. For speaking about certainties means that each one of us had wondered and is still wondering about the meaning of certainty. What is the meaning of the existence becomes an immense certainty, and I'm sure that our speaker will have reflected on that for months. But he will tell us later. So certainty is unavoidable. Our desire is unavoidable. We know that if we have no certainties, that would mean discomfort. And we have been very grateful to the certainties that we have. But at the same time, we have realized that the issue of living and to have certainties in life is not as much in keeping to a heritage of certain things. As a matter of fact, this implies taking up risks continually and, allow me to quote the White Horse, drama we saw yesterday, the risk of throwing the sword beyond certainties is something very different from certainties. And to abandon what is safe, to gain what the heart desires. As a matter of fact, existing becomes an immense certainty. It was the meeting with those who say we have no certainties, as well as the clash that happened. When you meet people, indeed, you meet those who say, I have no certainties. And to clash with relativism, denying human beings the right to certainties. And for that reason, we learned that we don't need moral or ideological certainties. We want to have a life experience which can have positive repercussions on everybody. So this is a short story of what we did and how we came to this title. Help us understand once more that the title of the meeting are sorts of prophecy, or rather than a prophecy, it's something which indicates that we are working together. And while working together, we understand what the title of this meeting means. Professor Esposito will talk about an issue which will help us better understand certainty and to become more aware of the reasonableness which is in the title, i.e., and the existent becomes an immense certainty. You have the floor. I think you would like to go to the podium. Thank you very much. I'd like to thank those who invited me to speak about the title of the meeting, because in that way I was forced to reflect and understand whether it is possible to conceive the term certainty. I must admit that what I'll tell you is something which I have learned through discoveries, and I would like to speak about such discoveries. I would like to invite you to join in a common work. Without you, without your questions, mine would only be a speech, maybe an interesting speech, and not an opportunity, as I hope, to learn something new. I will speak about 4 points and a foreword. The first point is uncertainty as a widespread condition in our time. Apparently, human beings of our times are all characterized by uncertainty, a condition which is so widespread that appears to be natural. It's some form of a structural fragility in our minds as a consequence of an endemical uncertainty in economic, social and political terms. But this phenomenon deserves to be carefully studied, because what is at stake is very important. This issue is provocative, and it would be very difficult to understand the scope of this issue if we were to use the typical psychological social analysis. The sociologist Zygmunt Bauman last year stated that the modern culture was born with the promise to wage a total war of attrition against the uncertainty, which is considered as a monster with many heads. Following the religious wars in Europe between the 16th and the 17th centuries, the philosophers concluded that God had withdrawn from direct supervision of what he has created, and that God turned deaf on the needs and desires of human beings. There was therefore a need to have a new, more human management which was intended to come to terms with the most terrible demons of uncertainty: contingency, casuality, lack of clarity, ambivalence, indetermination, and unforeseeability. That would have made it possible that the happiness of human beings would no longer depend on the fortune, but they were to conquer certainty following the adoption of scientific knowledge and technological application. However, this strategy was not successful as expected. In the 18th and 19th century, they used to think that the lack of a complete victory over uncertainty depended on a number of problems which had not been scientifically tackled. They thought, however, that all problems could have been solved through science. The real novelty, the dramatic change, according to Bauman, happened in the past 50 or even many more years, when the meaning of the term contingency started to change. Contingency means that we are finite beings, hence that we depend on nature and on the events of history. So in the past, that which was simply unexpected or not controllable was considered as a marginal phenomenon. Starting from the second half of the 20th century, it is as if everything converged towards precariousness. From knowing the universe to the analysis of the individual self, from elementary structures of matter to the dynamics of complex societies, the side effect phenomena were interpreted as primary attributes or reality, and they were their first explanation. So, I quote Bauman, we are aware that contingency, casualty, ambiguity, irregularity are typical characteristics of what exists, and so they cannot be removed or outcast from social and individual life of human beings. In terms of personal experience, our concerns and our anxieties have changed vis-à-vis the inability to tackle the threats posed by casualty and unforeseeability. We feel a worse uncertainty more than in the past, the sociologist writes, is the fact that we are now aware that we have no power, and we have the suspicion that this being without power is something which cannot be treated. So uncertainty appears unsurmountable, but this does not mean that we have decided not to continue to find certainties. And from that, our fears grow and grow. So the social organization and the setup, which was conceived as a barrier against instability and conflicts, or natural conflicts, just think, for example, to the state of Hobbes, it ends up in multiplies the reasons to be uncertain. The solutions that so far the welfare state tried to guarantee to citizens have now been downloaded on the ability of individual persons to find individual answers to social problems. But still, very often, such ability appears to be untruthful. We have not the impression to have the adequate knowledge or the adequate power to face the dangers and what is unexpected in life. And the result of that is loss of self-esteem, shame, for we feel inadequate vis-à-vis this task, and we feel humiliated. So to conclude this brief history of modern uncertainty, Bauman concludes, and I quote, everything concurs to make us feel that we are in a continuous and untreatable state of uncertainty, i.e. that we are not able to pick up the control of our life, thus being condemned to a condition which is not different from that of the plankton, which is shaken by waves which origin, pace, direction and intensity are unknown, unquote. Uncertainty is a sort of a precarious condition of existence. On the one hand, we continue to have great expectations from technology and science, which we hope can help us to control nature, and to ask from governments that they protect our individual and social rights. On the other hand, such expectations and such claims end up in hiding the most radical and disquieting element, i.e. that we are not the masters of our fate. So a question comes to my mind. So this lack of certainty, which we all perceive, does it totally and exclusively coincide with our inability to face the events of life, which are unexpected or natural events or accidents in history? So if the answer is yes, that means that uncertainty is just the result of a condemnation, something which seems like a curse. But if we check more attentively, it can also indicate something else, i.e. the fact that we are continually and naturally exposed to what happens, which touches us, and for this very same reason it provokes and it involves us. So the key element is that we should not limit the borders of uncertainty. The discomfort that uncertainty induces on us is unavoidable, but as such, this is the sign of a much deeper enigma, the trace of a more radical discomfort, i.e. the fact that our accomplishment is not achieved by us alone. And so this is one of the reasons why our individual existence is limited. But not only this, indeed, the projects, scientific and political projects, which were promised to give a better control life and the world, are inadequate. But this is not the only reason. What is at stake is much more, i.e. the fact that we are an unavoidable need, we are, not we have, we are an unavoidable need of uncertainty which we rarely meet. On the majority of cases, we make up for that by simply and comfortably denying that we have that need. But this need continues to come up, even if we have rights guaranteed and expectations promised by the adequate laws. So we have to be aware of this and try to recognize the voice of uncertainty when it is calling us. Second point, the fight, an equal fight against fate, i.e. the search for the lost certainty. Philosophers, in particular of the modern age, have always been stressing the importance of being able to recognize, explain, and solve the tragedy of certainty. Yes, because more than uncertainty, it is certainty to configure itself as a dramatic possibility for human beings, for it always implies an alternative, either accepting that there is a certain significance or meaning of the self and of the world to be welcomed unchecked, or on the contrary, to think that this is only the result of a conception of our mind. Today, this philosophical game is played in the most diffused ideology of our times, what is known as naturalism. This is based on the idea that all human experience can be explained based on certain factors and physical, chemical, neuronal mechanisms. So confining the need we have for certainty to a very refined evolutional strategy which human beings use in order to be able to survive, i.e. to contrast the great law of nature, i.e. the uninterrupted cycle from birth to death. But modern naturalism contains also another idea, which is more ancient, nearly archaic, which is rehashed paradoxically, through the most refined progresses of biological sciences and neurosciences, i.e. that the real destiny of human beings, the ultimate meaning of their existence, consists in their belonging to the impersonal and necessary mechanism of nature. Philosophical rationalism of modern times, at least starting from the 17th century with Spinoza, tried to explain the reasons of the fear that we feel because of the uncertainty of our finite condition, stating that this is only the result of ignorance and the bad influence of the Jewish Christian tradition, according to which what is finite has its origin in infinite, and so goes for its fate. But if uncertainty is the result of ignorance, Spinoza's solution consists in going beyond uncertainty through purification of our mind and by getting free from our passions, so that we can more convincingly accept our natural fate. In order to not to be affected by uncertainty, we need to abandon once and for all the idea that the human being and the whole world can have an origin and a scope which go beyond human beings and the world in itself. So for rationalists, this indeed completely changed the Christian meaning of freedom and history. So something starts which will bear the extreme fruits in an emblematic thinker, Friedrich Nietzsche, who writes in the Fall of the Idols, 1888. And I quote, "No one gives to man, no God, no the society, no the parents, no himself, his own characteristic. No one is responsible for his existence. The fact that they are made in this or that way, of being in such a situation or a certain place. The fatal nature of human beings cannot be disentangled by the fatality of everything which was and which will be. So the human being is not the consequence of a personal purpose or of a will or of an aim. It was us who invested the idea of aim or scope. As a matter of fact, there is no such a thing in reality. So we are necessary. We are just a fragment, a shard of destiny. We belong to the whole. We are in the whole, but outside the whole there is nothing." So this answer cannot be analyzed in a simplistic way. We are always feel discomfort for that, and for the many is the most radical alternative to Christian tradition. But if we examine it with attention, we'll see clearly that this giving up to the metaphysical categories of the Christian West, i.e. the relationship between finite and infinite, the fact that a finite body should have an origin and a name, if we give up all of this, well, we'll have to pay a very high price. It means devaluating the self as a subject which is a point of discontinuity in the natural order. So under this perspective, the free will of human beings will be accomplished only if they accept their destiny, as if time and history could no longer present us with new things, but be just an eternal repetition. Let us listen to what Nietzsche says in the Gaia Scienza text. What will happen if one day or a night a demon crept in the most solitary of your solitudes and would say, this life, as you live it and you experience it, you'll have to live it again and so many times again, and there will be nothing new ever. You will have to repeat every pain, every suffering, every breath, everything, be it very small or big in your life, will have to come back to you, and same sequence and succession, and the same will happen to this spider or this moonbeam among the branches, and this very second and the self, the eternal time hour of the existence or sun clock is then repeated with all the sun grains. Don't you think that that would be terrible for you? Wouldn't you curse the demon who pronounced such words? But it might also be that, and this is the intuition, the tragic intuition of Nietzsche, it might also happen that you have lived just once an immense second, so you could have answered that you are a god, and I never perceived a much more divine thing. So you should like and love your life, not to desire more anything which could be different. You only desire this very last moment. So this is the key element, in my opinion, of the whole issue. Love oneself, for Nietzsche, means that you only desire that you are necessary, without considering your desires. But in the end, who will ever be able to achieve that position? And Nietzsche is clear, only the wise ones, only those who are able to construct themselves, as it happened to lay philosophers using ascetical techniques. This is what Salvatore Natoli stressed when he mentioned the neo-paganism of this era, and I quote, so to be at the height of what the time demands is necessary to fold us on ourselves, collect all our powers, and transform ourselves in points of resistance. On the other hand, we know that we are ourselves, the less we depend. The more we are ourselves, the less we depend from others. So this is the ideal of the neo-paganism. So the ideal would that be going back to practicing ancient pagan virtues, the most noble attempt to control our own destiny, i.e. laying on ourselves our burden. This is the supreme virtue, and this work is moderation in the government of the self, in what the Greek used to call autarky. In such a perspective, the virtuous person is the one who can administer their own power. They are those who can indeed give measure to their own desires without giving up the desire, but still without surrendering to their own desire. I quote Natoli again, the desire is a power which deludes us, because we forget that the force that we have is finite, just a grain of sand, a grain of nature. What happened in the moral practices of Epicureans, the aim of those was that of create their own nature and to forge themselves as men, seemed to be similar to some trendy ideas of the modern cultural anthropology. For example, I am thinking of Francesco Remotti. They stress that being humans, don't get lost. We have to do that. We have to say these things to understand.
Bisogna fare questo cammino.
So we have to do that together in order to understand what is the meaning of the word certainty. Otherwise, we are not able to understand it. So what is the modern cultural anthropology does? They state that a human being is the result of a continuous process of anthropopoiesis, i.e. a construction of the self. Every person continually builds and constructs him or herself. So the human nature is nothing which is given for granted to human beings. It's a fiction, it's an illusion in a technical sense of the word. It's a sort of cultural fiction which exclusively depends from the degree of adaptation and adjusting to the natural environment and to the society. From this point of view, certainty is no longer to be considered as a subjective basis of human subjectivity, as if there is something objective to be shared. Human nature, if considered as a structure, is only the mere belonging to the species, whereas the meaning of living is considered as a merely subjective option. So the other side of the natural necessity, which is at the basis for cultural relativism. And let's go back to our common thread. There is something which is still unresolved. Even though we try to solve this problem, it continuously appears. In the end, both accepting that the necessary order or nature is unsurmountable and trying to resist to that through an interior self-training, or by simply welcoming the fact that fiction and illusion are unavoidable, well, the dominant feeling could only be that of an ultimate lack of sense of our being. This does not mean that the human being should no longer pursue aims, have satisfaction, or abandon projects and goals. That means that, confronted with the need to fill a hole, we remain just irrational, fortuitous case of existence. So certainty means, on the one hand, something which brings about the fact that we are forced to live according to the laws of nature. On the other hand, certainty is something which implies establishing some forms of self-assurance through some forms of rights and guarantees so that we can oppose and resist the casual events, i.e. the nothing, the void and the death. One might say that this is our destiny, that this is our nature. But if this is so, we wonder how comes that this nature is not sufficient to itself? How comes that the accidental and casual nature of our existence, i.e. living without a reason in this world, why should this continue to create discomfort and suffering to us? Why all the explanations that we can find are not satisfactory? Third point. At the origin stands the certainty of existence. Uncertainty is disquieting to us because it provokes us. We are stimulated to discover that at the beginning we are signed by one certainty, This is the coup de théâtre that our being gives to us. And it is because this certainty is already known to us that we can suffer for its absence. It's not an insurance, it's not a guarantee that we have on life. It's the original experience that signed us all, i.e. the fact that we had been wanted and welcomed by the lovely eyes of our mother, and have perceived the meaning of our natural existence by taking milk from her breast. So this is the certainty which comes before any uncertainty, and the certainty that uncertainty is clear. The fact that we have come to the world in a specific relationship, we are of someone, and as such we are ourselves. And it is in this recollection that we can explain our need for certainty. When I say that we should better understand uncertainty, I'm not saying that we have to be happy, to be precarious and live in confusion. On the contrary, I'm saying that our weakness would not be perceived if it were not used to remind us of some form of imprinting of ourselves, i.e. the certainty that there is a meaning which is given to us from someone else and from someone who came before us. The certainty is not something that we build, it's something that we receive. Is something which generates us and as such can become ours. And I'm reminded of what St. Augustine of Hipona mentioned when speaking a desire which is shared by all human beings, i.e. vita beata, happiness. This desire would not be understood. It would be not possible to understand if human beings did not already know what happiness is, or if they had not experienced that, so that they remember it, desire and hope for that. Also reminded of what Descartes did. He started from analyzing the idea of a universal doubt. The modern man of Descartes is a person which has doubts on everything which exists, also on their own body. He had discovered that the only certainty was a solipsistic certainty, i.e. the thinking ego, the self as a thinking, and then came a surprise. By reflecting on the ideas that this solitary self can conceive, Descartes realizes that there is a very special idea, the idea of the infinite or of God, which our thinking self finds in itself, even if they did not produce it, because a human being is a finite substance. So Descartes, those who has become known as the inventor of the modern man, write from that it necessarily follows that I am not alone in this world. And if I had no perception of the infinite, I would not be able neither to doubt nor to desire. So this original experience of certainty as a relationship which is basic to human experience is not seen only in some special cases.
I believe it indeed represents the permanent structure of each gesture of ours, both of affection and knowledge. The certainty is the acknowledgement on the side of an individual, i.e. the assent that we give to a truth, a fact, a feeling, an idea, a meeting, which is presented to us as an objective phenomenon. And when I say objective, I mean not just because it takes place out of us, but because, more specifically, it is other from us. Certainty is a condition, is an inevitable position of our being as conscious individuals, so that we are aware of ourselves and the rest of the world. Being certain could be seen as the fundamental attitude of our I. How do we realize that this is the case? Well, whenever we, as urged by the emergence of things or by surrounding circumstances, so every time we ask why, we state to ourselves that we are made for a reply. That is, that we are a desire for truth and a need for certainty. This very close link between research and certainty is confirmed by a recent book by an Italian philosopher whose name is Diego Marconi. And Marconi, in his book, makes a comment on a very famous sentence by Lessing. Lessing was a noble father of the German Enlightenment, and he stated what is true today. What happens in philosophy and in life are to look for certainty. Lessing wrote in the 18th century, and here I quote, "What causes the value of each individual man is not so much the truth that man owns, but rather the honest effort to get to the truth. As a matter of fact, the efforts that make man may bring about an enhancement, not because truth is owned, but because it is sought after, because the ownership and possession just makes man lazy, quiet, and biased." End of quote. So if God had all the truth in his right hand and in the left the quest for truth, and he would ask us so what we'd rather have, well, Lessing would have no doubts. Pure truth is only for God and is to be left to him. The quest for truth belongs only to mankind, and indeed it is the only thing that man should choose. And Marconi adds to that, and I quote, "I would never dream to deny the value of a philosophical or religious quest." And yet, this idea by Lessing, that is, that what is important is to search for the truth and not the finding of truth, well, this has always seemed to me as a total silliness. From the home keys to the effective treatment for ovary cancer. Obviously, we are always looking for something. We look to find for something. Obviously, we are certainly not looking to try and square the circle or perpetrate perpetual motion. Making the search more noble than the finding of a result is what makes an effort totally idiotic. So, turning upside down Lessing equation, we could say that if the quest for truth would be an end in itself, over time, it wouldn't make us awake. It wouldn't make us sleepless. It is indeed not so much the finding of what is truth, but rather the foregoing to that, which is the sign of the laziness of the reason. With Lessing, basically, there's already a gap, a divorce between the quest for the truth and the possession of the truth, so much so that looking for something implies never achieving what you look for, and on the other hand, owning something implies not looking for that anymore. But if we look at the way certainty actually is shaped in our experience, then we can say that that is the assumption guiding all research. So it is not just but the conclusion of a process, but rather it coincides with the all dynamic process, the relationship between the I, our I, and the being. The problem does just affect the soundness of our knowledge, but rather the fundamental option of our own personal experience. This is why I'd like to add to that a final consideration. When do we get certain about anything? And now, fourth part, certainty as the risk for assent, reason and will. If certainty always implies some kind of assent, i.e. an acceptance of a certain fact, implying yes to reality, well then, in that case, it depends on an action by the intellect that is caused by will. In this perspective, it requires an assent to truth. We could term it faith or trust in a non-fideistic meaning, in a non-sentimental meaning, but rather in a very rational way, as certainty is never a mechanism, but it rather impacts on our freedom. A number of philosophers, I'm thinking about Husserl, for example, refer to this primary action on the side of our intelligence. So primarily, follow me, our intelligence is saying yes to reality, is an act of trust to the being, and he referred to that as the originary faith, o Glaube or doxa. I found a very interesting description of this originary faith in this text by Balthasar. He wrote, those philosophers who in the long term feel uncertain and lost before truth are right in trying to follow the flow in order to make experience next to the waves of what actually water is and how you can swim in it. Those who are not risky enough to make this choice will never feel, will never experiment what swimming is. And likewise, those who don't want to leap into truth will never arrive at the certainty of the existence of the above. So this first act of faith, i.e. the trust of somebody swimming in the water, is not irrational. In fact, it is just the first step to ascertain in principle the existence of the rational. But this original risk that has already been described by von Balthasar is not only the risk of the beginning, but it is also the secret move of every moment of our process as conscious beings. And then again, I quote von Balthasar, as the swimmer should always go on swimming not to drown, despite the fact that he has become an ever more expert swimmer, likewise, those who know should try day after day to raise a question on the essence of truth, without for that being either skeptical or destructive. And this is indeed was Thomas Aquinas would call cogito. Indeed, he said that to get to know the truth, the being, to be really certain of the being, a decision of the intellect has to be passed, that there is a deliberate action on the side of the intelligence. This means that we are not just recording of facts of reality, but we are affected by reality, and we have to receive that reality. We realize what is coming on to us, and that is not a voluntary decision. That is the originary act of will, and it is not us creating the truth, but we accept the fact that the truth can get to us. And even when it comes to faith, and not the ordinary faith, but the faith as that knowledge whereby we base ourselves on a number of clues, as, for example, with the Christian faith. And based on those clues, we get to know what we can receive by ways of the other experiences being referred to us. And Thomas Aquinas was pretty much an expert on the subject, and he stated that even in that case, you cannot just recognize that something is true or false. What you need indeed is an approval on the side of our intellect, so that we should say yes. This implies that for us as man, as human being, certainty is never a mechanical result due just to the evidence of something. So a truth is not something that you do once and for all, but it is rather a process. And the truth is pending approval by the eye. And on the other hand, and this eye always require the open action of the will. The nature of certainty basically owns also the time factor. Over and above time, there are no shortcuts apart from skepticism. It was most of all John Henry Newman who focused on this incredible phenomenon of ascent as a permanent condition of the path to certitude. All the objects we know, as Newman says, be them concrete things or notions inside our minds, require an act of ascent on the side of our spirit. So one more little effort now, please stay with us. So it would seem obvious to us to state the following. Our ascent is all the more certain the more our reasoning are deduced logically, in that we deduct logically, we establish a logic connection with the inner reality. Whereas when, for example, in the case of human relationship, when we are dealing with interpretation being given, when there's no logical evidence, well, in that case, we are going to have a less certain assent. Well, Newman actually turns the whole issue upside down and shows and proves, even in his own way, that when our reasoning follow the way through probability, that is, when based on elations or just signs or clues that need being interpreted, that need being focused on and looked at, only then can we have an unconditional assent, i.e. full of reason. So the more the adventure of the interpretation of reality is open, the more it is likely to arrive at an objective reality. And this is really quite an extraordinary, because then you mean that the certainty is the opposite to interpretation. This is what is usually held. But what Newman says is that you need interpretation. You have to use your liberty and arbitrium in understanding what reality is telling you. And so basically through our intelligence, we can get to an objective certainty. In many cases, we give our assent to things that are presented to us by means of non-logical evidence. We all believe, for example, we all believe we exist. We all believe we were born on a certain day. We all believe we are individuals with our own identity. This is something that we cannot logically prove. We also all believe that there is a world away from us, beyond us, and that there are other eyes, and that yesterday something has happened, and so on and so forth. And this is really interesting, follow me. And this is one of the issues that are going to emerge over and over again, also in Don Giussani's writing. So there are many cases where the foundation of certainty is the result of the trust in somebody else. And this example is the one that is provided by Newman. When a mother would teach to her child a certain line by Shakespeare, and the child asks his mom what that means, so that line means, well, then the mother could say that he's too young to understand that line. But then a mother could say that that line has a beautiful meaning, and that this is something that the boy will understand in future. And the child, in faith on her word, could give his assent to the proposition as expressed in the Shakespeare line. And it is not in the verse that he had learned by heart, but in its being beautiful and good and true. This assent is extremely lively. It owns a force in the life which is more important than another assent, because for a child, the frankness and authority of a mother are not an abstract truth, but are connected to the image and to the love of that person who is part of himself, so much so that he would be willing to give his life to defend the sincerity of his mum. It wouldn't be fair, therefore, to confuse the dynamic process of our assent with a degree of logical demonstration. Logic is certainly important, but certainty requires the whole of our eye. This natural capability of giving an assent through our mind is accompanied by the capability to speculate on this assent, constitutes for Newton the peculiar character of certainty. Certitude in the perception of a truth, with the perception that it is a truth, says the professor in English. And again, he repeats the same in Italian. Certitude is a perception of a truth, with the perception that it is a truth. If all act of knowledge requires our assent, even though we might not realize that, in certitude, this assent is expressed explicitly. It becomes a conscious process. And now I'm using my own words to state that getting to know something true, I perceive its taste. Its knowledge. Therefore, I would realize that a truth would reach me, and that I am reached by the truth, being changed by that. This type of knowledge, certitude, is not only necessary for the eye to survive, to get to know, and to act, but it requires the whole of the eye. You cannot have certitude without the eye. The true certitude indeed requires me, the whole of the eye, with reason, sentiment, will, and liberty. Last bullet, opening. Perhaps we are now in the position as to understand a little more the sentence by Don Giussani that actually entitles the meeting edition of this year. The existence becomes an immense certainty. I believe that, as Emilia was saying earlier on, the verb is the most interesting part of this sentence. A certainty is something which is discovered on an ongoing basis. It is not absolute, as ideologically said. It is an event, rather, something, therefore, that is actually happening all the time, because if it were not to happen in the present point in time, it would not exist at all. And how could man suffer the test of certitude that represented by the constraint and evil? The more digital certainty is that of the relationship with our mom or with those who actually loved us. That certitude certainly would not die before pain and death. Could we ever be happy with just projecting our certitude beyond the present experience as a dream or a utopia, some kind of sort of sad consolation to survive? Well, the drama of certainty shows all its radicality. Its need is infinite and cannot be met by nothing less than the infinite. It took something unexpected and surprising to experiment another possibility of certainty, if compared to the necessity of the natural mechanism of that of logical deduction. But that it should not be reduced to impossible hope for the present. It took Christ to come to be flesh, to be made flesh in the world, to start again the cycle of the natural time, stating itself as a principle of a new knowledge, the only one that could truly enhance the requirement for meaning, the expectation, the wish for happiness of each individual man. Christ is that single case in the history of mankind where the meaning, the logos, has become a friend of coincidence and lot. Ever since, each case, each person, each event was not just a coincidence, not because of following a number of pagan philosophies, everything is necessary or everything is God, as is the case with pantheism, but because God was made man, thus enabling man to become truly himself, i.e., raising questions, making wishes, and waiting, certain of a response. As is true with any scholar of the philosophical thinking, may not but recognize it is Christianity that paved the way to the possibility for freedom. Not just the possibility to choose something as opposed to something else, but rather the possibility to discover the infinite value of myself, thanks to the direct relationship with the one who has created me and is creating me. It is Christianity that has paved the way in the history thanks to an event that changed the direction of time. It took Christ for certainty in man not to be paid at the cost of his liberty, for certainty not to be withdrawn from the drama of history, and not to be held under threat by the finite nature and death. Thanks to the resurrection in the flesh, a true Copernican revolution took place in the possibility to get to know and in the capacity to be certain of mankind. That event has presented itself and is still presented in history as the more relevant event for human reason, as it states a mysterious presence of the being that cannot be only be connected to nature, but thanks to which we can be certain that nature itself and life are given to us, is for us. As Don Giussani would state in the same page, it is thanks to our gift of the Spirit that man can become aware of the abysmal gratuitousness of his being, discovering that loneliness and impotence are vanquished thanks to the strength of the another. This mysterious truth is constantly reaching us, not because of a delusion on our side, but because our presumption that certainly can become immense. In the life of a man, there's always a time when this meaning at least once was made manifest. And the Christian tradition identifies that with an objective and a secular name, i.e. the less clerical and ideological name you can think of. We are called upon to be, at every point in time, our I is a vocation, is a calling. We are closely related with what existence gives us. And this is not just an abstract motivation, but it is what you find in the coincidence of life. As you may very well understand, it's not so much a matter of a program drawn up by philosophers, but rather it is a matter of phenomenon that allows for unexpected innovation for philosophy itself. Philosophy should be considered as a demand on the side of the reason on the ultimate sense of itself and the world. Personally speaking, I can say that the more stringent evidence of this innovation in my philosophical work was discovering that the certainty of Christ is the only case where a total and ultimate response to the question of mankind doesn't do away with that request. It doesn't just solve it, but as a matter of fact, it triggers it again, it feeds it, it exalts it, as it is true for all human processes. Unlike what we maintain for laziness or for inexperience, it is only a certain man that could be truly disquiet and could enjoy his disquiet in an expectation, enabling a certainty always to take place again. This tells us that the certainty is not something of our making, but it's rather something that we really need for all our making, for all our constructions, to tackle all the different crises. And this is the difference. This is what makes the difference. Certainty is not just reassurance granted by the structure of the state, or it could also be play of man, thanks to the guarantees of state, can enable men to tackle the different needs of life. This process can be termed as the shift from welfare state to a state where you are protagonist, from an idea of certainty so as to protect you from the unforeseen events of life, to a certainty whereby you recognize the ultimate meaning of ourselves. Now, by way of conclusion, I'd like to say that there is a sign that basically confirms this work and that changes the perception of time. Time would seem very much the enemy of certainty, because time is what makes everything pass. But it could also be the bench test, the more radical bench test for certainty. As Benedict XVI told us this year in his message conveyed to the meeting, a man cannot survive and live without a certainty on his destiny. Only when you are sure that the future is a certain reality, is a positive reality, then the present becomes more easy to tolerate. Christ enables man, or grants man, the possibility to exist that would be otherwise unknown, i.e. with a hope in the future that is very much the result of a present certainty. And once again, Benedict XVI said, those who make of their existence a positive experience certainty is for those who are questioning all the time. You can go on questioning about the reason of oneself and the world, only asking a question to somebody, that somebody with his present triggers my desire to be and love. It is that discovery that Dante referred to when he stated that he had seen in Beatrice's eyes nourishment that never stops hunger or extinguishes thirst. As a matter of fact, it is so strong as to reawaken them on an ongoing basis. And now the philosopher quotes Dante with the verses stating again the above. Thank you very much.
I think that listening to such a speech for more than an hour, indeed, it's not one of the easiest things to do. And we cannot neglect that many of the passages in the paper are not fully clear. We can also must admit that we find it pretty difficult to follow him. However, I do believe that this applause is not the expression of supporters. It's a sign of gratitude, because notwithstanding it was difficult and long, because what we heard today is, I think, even if we had understood only just a part, or if we were indeed impressed by just a fragment of that, I think that this applause is a sign of gratitude for the confirmation that we had that indeed existence becomes an immense certainty. Thank you very much.